Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto, Willies. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Let's start on Project 2025 because that's the first thing I have on the list. And what I found is the following. I found a great site, and I want everybody to go there if you're able to. The site is called democracyforward.org. Democracyforward.org. I think it's and it says the Project 2025 is among the most profound threats to the American people. And here's how they start. I love the way they started because I'm going to try to read all 900 something pages in the next few weeks. But here is what they say. We read Project 2025's entire 900 plus page mandate for leadership so that you don't have to. What we discovered was a systemic, ruthless plan to undermine the quality of life of millions of Americans, remove critical protections and dismantle programs for communities across the nation, and prioritize special interests and ideological extremism over people. From attacking overtime pay, student loans, and reproductive rights to allowing more discrimination, pollution, and price gouging, those behind Project 2025 are preparing to go to incredible lengths to create a country only for some, not for all of us. If these plans are enacted, which Project 2025's authors claim can happen without congressional approval, 4.3 million people could lose overtime protection, 40 million people could have their food assistance reduced, 220,000 American jobs could be lost, and I think it's actually more than that when you count some of the tariff stuff. The stakes are higher than ever for democracy and for people. The threats aren't hypothetical. These are their real plans. The Heritage Foundation and the 100,000 plus organizations that make up the Project 2025 Advisory Board have mapped out exactly how they will achieve their extreme ends. They aim to try and carry out many of the most troubling proposals through an anti-democratic president and political loyalists installed in the executive branch without waiting for congressional action. You know, usually Congress has to approve certain people, but they can actually do appointments, and while Congress is working. And while many of these plans are unlawful, winning in court is not guaranteed, given that the same far-right movement that is behind Project 2025 has shaped our current court system. That is why we are so concerned about the Supreme Court declaring Donald Trump all but king. When they said that he could really do no wrong, right? If he's doing it under the cloak of official duty, he can do no wrong. Because again, Trump can do whatever he wants to do going forward. Even if we keep the Senate, even if we keep the House, and let's say they vote to impeach, there will never be enough senators to convict because this country is not a democracy. And the way that they are apportioned, the Senates, there will never be 67 senators to convict the president, but it goes deeper than that. The president can hold the Congress hostage because the Congress knows that while the president has no problem making sure that Social Security checks doesn't go out or anything like that, he can stop Social Security checks. He can stop a lot of these other things from going out to blackmail Congress into doing whatever arcane thing he wants done. To combat threats posed by Project 2025, we have to first understand them. Good point. What follows are some of the most dangerous proposals that make up Project 2025, specifically those that they plan to implement through federal agencies and a far-right executive branch. The majority of Americans share the same values and priorities, but Project 2025 wants to push an extreme, out-of-touch agenda on all of by reading this guide and sharing it, we can begin to address these threats. And again, the guide is at democracyforward.org. I repeat, democracyforward.org. So what is Project 2025? Project 2025 Presidential Transition Project is a well-funded 8-figure effort from the Heritage Foundation and more than 100 organizations to enable a future anti-democratic presidential administration to take swift far-right action that could cut wages for working people, dismantle social safety net programs, reverse decades of progress for civil rights, redefine the way our society operates, and undermine our economy. A central pillar of Project 2025 is the Mandate for Leadership, a 900-page policy playbook authored by former Trump administration officials and other extremists that provides a radical vision for our nation and a roadmap to implement. These guys intend to win. And that's why the second subject we're going to talk about is going to touch on Joe Biden. And while our phones aren't working for you to go ahead and point out or tell me, let's use the chat to do that. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to give the highlights of the evils of Project 2025. And then I'm going to go into how do we solve it? What are the issues that we have to work with? So here are the proposal. Immediately, cut overtime protection for 4.3 million workers just through executive action, guys. Stop efforts to lower prescription drug prices. Again, big pharma. Why do you think the billionaires are investing in Donald Trump? Why do you think so? Stop efforts to lower prescription drugs. And for all of you in the chat right now that think you're voting for Donald Trump, you're a right winger, you're a MAGA guy, you are voting not only for the demise of others, you're voting for your own demise. When you vote for Donald Trump and when the Project 2025 come into existence, your grandmother, your grandfather, your friends, your families, they are as well are going to be hurt. They're the ones that are going to pay more for insulin. They're the ones that are going to keep paying the exorbitant prices for these drugs. So remember, when you are voting for Donald Trump and you're voting for 2025, Project 2025, and when you vote for Project 2025, you're voting to harm yourself. So you're not only sticking it to liberals and all of us, you're also sticking it to yourself. All right, what else does it want to do? Limit access to food assistance, which average of more than 40 million people in 21.6 million households who rely on those monthly food assistance. So let's talk a little bit about that. Who do you think is the largest recipient of food assistance? The people who vote for Donald Trump. Appalachia, 50% of the people in the whole Appalachian Trail are on government subsidies. Okay? They don't look like me, but they're on government subsidies. 50%. So when they go out there happy-go-lucky and they go vote for Donald Trump, you know who's going to have to try to save them? The Democrats in Congress are going to be fighting like hell not to get the food stamp programs cut because they know it affects us all, not just liberals, not just you progressives, but it will also affect all those folks in Appalachia, but they don't know it. And they don't need to know it because after they get into power this time, they will make all those poor people vote. It's very difficult to protect themselves. That's all they want to do. That is why we have Reverend Barber, and I'm going to get Reverend Barber on the program again. Reverend Barber is trying to unite all poor people from around the country. He's trying to unite Appalachia. He's trying to unite the ghettos, the barrios, black, white, Asian, everybody, and say, let's not take our eye off the ball. Let's see what they are really doing to us. They're using whiteness to win. Think about this. They are using whiteness to win. But the people they're going to harm the most are their own white brothers and sisters. As you can see, we're still in flux in getting Baltimore ready. But folks, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about 40 million people, 21 million households that are going to be, that may lose a lot or limit their food assistance. That's not black people. That's not Asian people. You know, so I mean, there is a backstop within the MAGA movement that has a racial component. And that is what that's what Trump has been using. He made the other people, the boogie people. He made a lot of his white supporters believe that progressives are somehow looking out for those other people. And those other people are then hurting you, my dear, good white people. My white brothers and sisters, you can't fall for it. And the reason you can't fall for it is because you're voting against your own interests. What they tell you about putting us against each other has always been a lie. It has always been a lie. They did it from the FDR's creation of the not the Great Society, but you know what I'm talking about. FDR. They've always tried to make the other the boogie person, and they're doing it again. But for all the problem is enough people from Appalachia isn't watching Politics Done Right and other programs like this, and that is what they depend on. They teach them. Only watch Fox News. Only watch OAN. Only watch Newsmax. And anything those other people are saying, they're lying to you. We have to penetrate that psyche. When you see me overarchingly New Deal, thank you very much, Rodnin. When you see me overarchingly try to reach the other side, it's because I know if I get a chance to speak to some, even if they're not immediately listening to me, let's give an example. Every now and then, Eric Hayes, because of him watching Politics Done Right, the way the algorithms work is some of his friends will ever so often get a link to Politics Done Right. Ever so often, all our right-wingers that are on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, just because they are watching Politics Done Right, every so often, some of their own people will get some of what we're given in their feeds. Okay, so it's so very important that we keep that door open. It is so very important that we just don't sit back and say, those people are so stupid. They're voting against their own interests. That's not the way to do it. It's not the way to do it. So what else does it do? Cut American Rescue Plan, programs that have created over 220,000 jobs. And it's way over 220,000 jobs. This is old. Restrict access to medication, abortion. Push more than 33 million people enrolled in Medicare towards Medicare Advantage and other worse private options. Remember all the things that we talk about Medicare Advantage and how evil it is and what it does. That's what they're doing. Deny students in 25 states and Washington, D.C. access to student loans because their state provides in-state tuition to undocumented immigrants. So if your state decides to be humane, like Germany, you can go to Germany as an American citizen and get a fairly free education. You can go to Brazil. You can go to a lot of foreign countries and they will pay. This is not opinion, Eric. The good thing about it, it's written down in, guess where? In the Project 2025. Look, the right wing is so sure. The right wing is so sure that its people don't read. The right wing is so sure that its people are stupid. Remember, Donald Trump said it. I am running as a Republican because I didn't say it. Donald Trump said it. He went on air and he said, I like stupid people. I didn't say it. Donald Trump said it. Okay? So let's be very clear here. Now, as it turns out, they are so sure that people don't read, that they are laid out a map. They have laid out a map knowing that their folks won't read it, but that all those evil leaders around the country will. And as they read it, they'll join the Project 2025 domain and it'll get funding. And again, this is an opinion. It is written. You can go read it for yourself. It's not opinion. Go read it. Roll back civil rights protection across multiple fronts, including cutting diversity, equity, and inclusion related programs and LGBTQ rights in healthcare, education, and workplaces. So yes, there is a lot. And I don't say people should fear this. Americans shouldn't fear Project 2025. What Americans should do is ensure Project 2025 doesn't ever come to fruition.
Jack Van Bebba. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning, Egberto. I've got a full page written off your latest newsletter.
Let's go for it.
I'm gonna let her rip. Okay.
Let her rip.
Yes, the super rich are taking full advantage of the working class. Anytime you hear record profits, it's a sign. Those record profits were made off the hard work of the working class. Are the workers going to continue to accept this treatment? At some point, the workers will revolt. When it comes to beating back these fascist policies the super rich are using on the people, the solution is simple. Quit paying the people who are enslaving you. We have to slow the money moving up the chain by not spending to send the message up the chain, we've had enough. Slow down consumption of goods and services, auto loans, home loans, save your money. When they see the consumers are not spending, that sends a message. When people start canceling their insurance, sends a message to big healthcare. When people stop paying their taxes, it sends a bigger message.
That is 100% right. It sends a message. And you know what, Jack? It's interesting because I don't know if you remember at the beginning of the pandemic what happened. People stayed home. People didn't go to restaurants. People weren't doing anything. And we were at a state of panic, the corporatocracy that is, because they knew one thing. That was an inflection point. And they knew that when we came back, things could either stay the same or things could be different. An article written by Les Leopold, which at Common Dreams, one of the progressive rags that I like to go to because they cover things that are really of interest to the working class, the middle class. So he wrote an article titled Pillaging by the Super Rich Will Continue Until the Working Class Revolts. And yes, the super rich is concerned that the working class will revolt. And it's one of the reasons they invest so heavily into misleading us. They invest so heavily into us fighting each other. They are the ones that do a whole lot of that to make sure we fight each other. So here's how he starts. He says, there comes a time in the history of a nation when extreme inequality turns into pillage. If economic power is concentrated, so is political power, and the wealthy are able to do whatever they damn well please. They can lie, cheat, and steal because they know they won't be held accountable. And that's what they've been doing. Lying to you, stealing from you, and understanding that there are no consequences. And who is the biggest impersonation of no consequences for doing wrong, for stealing, for lying, for cheating? The current or the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, is actually proving that statement. He's lied continuously about what his record was as a president. He's lied about just everything before he got into the presidency. He's lied about his wealth. He's cheated people out of their monies by creating a false university. He's cheated his 501c3, his charitable organization, for taking the money that people donate to it for himself. He has pilfered the working class as people came and worked for him to build his different hotels, etc. Many of them were left holding the bags. And for that, he stole from them. He, as his wife was pregnant, he was messing around with call girls, if you will. Again, think about it. And his reward was to become president of the United States. And too many are still not holding him accountable. So we can start right at the top where we see we have given some people a pass to do us wrong. And at the same time, we continue to suffer without realizing the cause of that. Now, the question is, from Leopold, have the super rich now taken control of our political and economic system? Some current news make me worry. The answer is absolutely yes, sir. Let's start with the food industry, the food cartel that includes General Mills, PepsiCo, and Tyson, which has been jacking up prices nonstop since 2020. Why are food prices up 25% since then? These giants blame supply chain, which they created and which they've outsourced, etc. The rising cost of labor, that's a lie, because the American, if you take a look at the cost of labor relative to the productivity increase, it's stand still. People haven't been getting more money in the aggregate. And the rising prices of other inputs required to produce and distribute their products, that's a lie. We never really had an oil shortage. What we had is a created shortage by people saying, you know what, there's a lot of oil on the market. Let Saudi Arabia produce less oil. Let's produce less products so that we can jack the price up by creating a false shortage. So they've lied to you. They've lied to you. And now many of you are saying, oh, Biden, under Biden, we got inflation. What you got was the result of what these people have done. Make no mistake. It wasn't Biden. It was the corporation. And until you understand that and believe that, we will continue to have these false realities. We can't. These giants blame supply chain and rising costs of labor and the rising prices of other inputs required to produce and distribute their products. It is not their fault, they say, but the real culprit upon closer examination is stock buybacks. By raising prices and then using the cash to buy back their own stocks, thereby increasing the market value of each share. Stock buybacks do not increase the value of a company, but they move money effortless to the largest of the street share owners and to a company's top executives who receive most of their compensation via stock investments. Again, so these guys who run these companies, they get subsidies from the government. They increase the prices on you, and then they use that extra landfill in profits not to pay taxes on the extra money they're getting, but to do something called stock buybacks. And when you buy back stocks, there are no tax consequences. So you're simply taking money out of the corporations. And guess what? And when you, the individual who got that stock buyback, go ahead and realize the stock gains from that stock buyback, guess what happens? They pay a lower tax rate than you, the person who was working. Yet so many of us defend the system. Yet so many of us continue to put our heads in the sand as opposed to realizing who the culprits are. Oh, it's Biden under inflation. I did better under Trump. First of all, from a mathematical standpoint, that is not true. That is a provable lie. That is a provable lie. They tell you, and then we repeat. So many of us instantiate that and we believe it. And then we go say, Biden did this, but I'm sorry. It simply is not true. Look at your stock options for those who have stocks. Look at your 401k for those who have 401ks. And of course, for the most who have none of that, they pay the price for the pilfer. As food prices shot up 25%, the 10 largest grocery and restaurant brands have together returned a pledge to return more than $77 billion to shareholders. So here we go. All these companies that are supplying your grocery store, they raised their prices by a bunch. And they told their shareholders, guess what we're going to do for you, folks, shareholders? We are going to give you $77 billion in stock, in not only stock appreciation, but actually dividends. And that dividend come from us making more money. And that us making more money come from us inflating prices. It's called inflation. No. It's not called inflation. It's corporate greed rate. All right. Don't call it inflation. Call it what it is. Corporate greed rate. So they told their shareholders, we are going to give you $77 billion. So every time you say you're mad that your prices in the grocery store is going up, every time you are mad at Biden by saying, why is it so expensive? Remember, these companies promised their shareholders an additional $77 billion. Whose money is that? That's yours. That is that extra money you're paying for eggs, for cheese, for lettuce. Because the farmer and the guy picking the lettuce, he's not making any more money, but the shareholder was promised $77 billion. And guess what? He or she is getting it. You know, he or she is getting it. Don't be fooled. Let's be smart. In related news, California fast food giants have claimed that state's 2023 minimum wage law, which raised wages from $16 to $20 in California, killed 10,000 jobs. Oh my God, raising wages killed jobs. Oh, so what should we do? We should not give people more money to give them a living wage just so that employers can employ more people. But, you know, even that was a lie. A closer look picked up by the Los Angeles Times showed that the industry cooked the numbers. They lied to you by comparing employment in September with December. But every year, September is within the peak dining out season, and in December, people dine out least. When adjusted for seasonal variations or compared with the employment levels exactly 1 year earlier, both standard ways of measuring employment levels, guess what, my dear brothers and sisters? The numbers of jobs actually increased by 7,000 after the minimum wage law was enacted. In other words, they raised the minimum wage in California. And unlike the lie from the corporatocracy that said 10,000 jobs were lost, the reality is 7,000 jobs were gained. And it's not hard to understand why. If you are paying people more, the people who get paid more are the people who will spend that money immediately. As they spend that money immediately, guess what it does? It increases economic activity, and increased economic activity means you need more workers to cover that increased economic activity. It's not rocket science. It is just how things work. But they lie to you, and too many believe it. Boeing recently crashed into the news again. When company CEO Dave Calhoun was roasted by a couple of congressional committees about its shoddy production processes, there were plenty of outraged performances, but none of the so self-righteous lawmakers had the cojones to ask about the impact on safety of Boeing's $61 billion in stock buybacks, or about Calhoun, who hauled in $30 million in stock incentives while Boeing lost $1.6 billion in 2023. It is possible that maybe, just maybe, Boeing financed those buybacks by laying off workers, moving work to lower wage subcontractors, and cutting safety corners. Radio silence from Congress. Yeah, they wanted to roast this guy from Boeing, but at the same time, the capitalist structure that created the crash in Boeing, those plane crashes because of cut costs, that door flying open because you go to substandard services so that you can pay your stockholders more, so that you can have stock buybacks, so that you can have all these things. Come on, folks. They have been snowing you for a very long time. They have your eyes off the ball. They have you thinking about all the things that you don't need to think about, even as they pilfer you. Is the worker revolt going to happen? Or are we going to keep this false notion about the MAGA versus this and all? Look, you know why MAGA is MAGA? They're looking for answers too, because they know something is up. Unfortunately, they had the wrong man to ride, because they are riding somebody who pilfered them. But they're looking. They are looking. All of us need to be looking. All of us need to be doing the right thing. Then there's the way Wall Street squeezes out new home buyers by gobbling up houses and turning them into rentals. Let's not forget that John Deere recently announced moving jobs from the United States to Mexico, while feasting on government contracts and, of course, using job cuts to finance what again? Stock buyback. So we have Wall Street that's buying up homes. You go to any community with middle price homes, and you know what? You see a lot of empty homes, a lot of homeless, but a lot of empty homes. Why are they empty? They have owners, corporate owners, and they have the ability to keep these homes off the market. If they keep these homes off the market, what happens? The price of rentals go up because there is a shortage of homes, because there's a false scarcity by those who just hold on to these homes. And it's happening everywhere, from Atlanta, Georgia, to Houston, Texas, to everywhere. And you want to know why the prices of these homes are going skyrocketing? Get ready for the bubble to burst, folks. And then they're going to be coming back for some more corporate welfare when that occurs. Do we even have to mention how Big Pharma is charging us more than it does? Canadians, I mean, imagine that. Where is the glory, glory, hallelujah? Where is I love America? Where is we think America first? That's what they like to say, right? We care about America, but you know what? Big Pharma sells their drugs at a good price in Canada. They sell their products at good prices in France. They sell their drugs at good prices in Great Britain. Good prices everywhere but the United States. They pilfer you, and you support them. You support the big orange man that is there, that says as soon as he gets into office, he's promised the oil industry another $1 billion. He's promised the pharmaceuticals something else. He's promised all these rich people that are now giving him $50 million here, $25 million there, $10 million here, that he's going to serve them first. He claims he's going to give something to the workers for the restaurant industry. I'm not going to tax your tips. No, you don't need to tax your tips. You need to get rid of tips and tell these guys to pay these guys a living wage instead of the $2.13 an hour they make. Do we have to mention Big Pharma again? The ripoff to feed their profits, which then gets shipped to the richest of the rich via stock buybacks. Of the $3 trillion in after-tax U.S. corporate profits in 2022, about $1.31 trillion, about half, went to stock buybacks. That creates nothing. Remember, stock buybacks used to be illegal. But Reagan allowed tax buybacks, and since then they have pilfered us. Since then, our productivity have gone through the roof, but our wages have stayed stagnant. Not until we had this new type of progressive input that Brother Biden actually brought in because of the stimuli, etc., did we start to see some of this being mitigated. But since Reagan, there has not been really a real increase in the aggregate on your wages. There has not been. Corporate welfare, just hearing what phrases makes me nauseous because it's a stark reminder of how feeble we are. Progressives have been complaining about government giveaways to large corporations at least since 1970s, and the practice has only grown. I'll bet you already know how bad it is. We taxpayers give the oil industry about $20 billion a year. And guess what? Another billion is being promised a year in subsidies, while BP, Shell, Chevron, ExxonMobil, and Total Energies plow $104 billion in dividend and stock buybacks. Think about this. This is the money in excess of operation. This is money in excess of executive pay. This is money in excess of all these things, an extra $104 billion in stock buybacks, and we're giving them more money in subsidies. Think about that, folks. Greed. Is it ever enough? No. Wall Street may be getting as much as $800 million a day via the Federal Reserve, according to one report. You ever heard of quantitative easing? I have yet to find a credible source that adds it all up. I'm guessing it's well over $1 trillion a year in direct subsidies, tax breaks, and financial markets. Talking about welfare, they talk about the welfare mom or welfare dad who people get pissed off because I saw them put a stake in that cart, and then they paid with food stamps. You know who's getting the most food stamps and your money? The corporations are. And the money, and it is quantifiable and verifiable. And if we allow it, we fight each other. We fight the welfare recipient. We look at them with disdain. Working class revolt, folks, is ultimately what's going to come. The pitchforks. We're nowhere near any kind of organized mass uprising, but American workers are not stupid. They may not be able to spell out in detail how they're getting ripped off, but they know it's happening. Most importantly, they understand that the government works for the rich and not them. That's why so many are willing to support a train-wrecking outsider who attack the government, even when they are anti-worker billionaire buffoons. In 1964, 77% of Americans had trust in the federal government. Now it's 16%. 16% of us don't trust we the people. And you know why? Because we the people continuously allow the rich to snow us into electing buffoons. And in so doing, they pilfer us. And then we say, oh my God, look how bad it is. Well, it's in your hands. And in November, again, it is in your hands. It is in your hands. Welcome to another edition of Politics and Red. I'm Egberto, Willies, your host. Ali Velshi is an award-winning journalist, host of Velshi and chief correspondent for MSNBC, and a weekly economics contributor to NPR's Here and Now. He has covered multiple U.S. midterm and presidential elections and significant news stories around the globe, including extensive reporting from Israel during the war with Israel and Hamas, Ukraine, and across Central and Eastern Europe during the Russian invasion, the Syrian refugee crisis from Turkey and Jordan, and the Iran nuclear deal in Tehran. He hosts the Velshi Banned Book Club on MSNBC and the Velshi Banned Book Club podcast. Folks, check those things out. You've got to listen to that. You got to watch it. There are a few cable or broadcast hosts and journalists who I listen to or learn from at face value based on the trust they have earned with their reporting. Ali Velshi makes that list that fits on one hand. Velshi has won numerous awards that I'll enumerate in the subsequent blog and article after this interview. Anyway, Ali, welcome to Politics Done Right. How are you doing today?
It's good to be with you, my friend. I also consume all the stuff you put out. And, I just love the fact that in this world where news can be very shallow, right? You get the headlines and you don't get the context, or you have a hot take on the last thing that happened. One of the things I love about you is it's like you read the whole story. You go all the way back and tell you, where did this start? How did it become the way it did? And I think that is so desperately needed in our news environment today. So thank you for having me on.
Well, I appreciate that. And ditto on that. Look, you wrote a very important book. I'll be honest. First of all, I read the preface and then I kind of jumped through it. And I'll talk about what I jumped through before. But again, like I said, in reading the book, I said, well, look, I listened to Ali all of the times. And this is just a microcosm of who this guy has always been. So I am going to read the entire 300 pages, but I just have to do it over time. Anyway, sure. How to become an American in 3 steps got to me. And that you could make a movie out of that chapter. Look, you said it's 3 steps. The first step is arriving. The second step is the paperwork. The third step, I tell you something, really took to me. Here's what you wrote. You write this about being shot by the police, even as they knew you are a journalist. That was the moment, you said, that was the moment when I finally became a citizen in the deepest sense of the word, because that was the day I understood how invested in this place I truly need to be. One day I'll find out who shot me. And when I do, I'll go and I'll thank them, because what they did was open my eyes. They woke me up. They changed my entire outlook on democracy. That rubber bullet told me, you are in this fight. You are not watching it anymore. You are in it, whether you want to be or not. And that epiphany, in turn, is what led to this book.
Yeah.
Man, that is profound. Tell me about that.
Well, as journalists, we always struggle with, are we observers or are we in the story? And we try very hard not to be in the story, right? But as you know from my reporting, because you followed it for a long time, I don't ever want to be the subject of the story, but I always want to be in it. Insofar as I'm always on the ground with people. In the Ukraine war, I was on the train platforms when people were coming in. I don't like to be on balconies. I like to be talking to people all the time about what's going on in their experience. So I don't have this division between journalists on high and everybody else out here. But what I realized in Minneapolis when shot, not that I was shot, people get shot all the time, shot by an agent of the state who, I haven't tried this in court, but I believe knew that we were journalists and we identified ourselves as such. And I realized at that point, you're not an observer. You can't say, wow, what a great job. I get to watch history unfolding. You're in history. And all of a sudden, it created this direct line 125 years back to my family, who had been people who had done things to try and better the society in which they lived, including fighting apartheid for a long time, right? I have a grandfather who was Gandhi's youngest student. I have an uncle who was in jail for breaking the law and fighting apartheid. And I thought that when my parents came to these shores 50 plus years ago, that battle was over. That fight for democracy was over. We live in real democracies. Little did I know that democracy is a cactus. Right? It's pretty hardy if you have it, but you can't just stick the cactus in a dark drawer and hope it grows. It needs some care and watering. And we are all in that fight. That's when I realized in that moment, I'm in it. I'm in it. It's not just my job to tell people what's going on, but to bear witness for them, to hold power to account. Police and later on, Donald Trump described that night in Minneapolis when I got shot as something far more colorful, but entirely wrong. It was entirely dishonest. It was this idea that we and the protesters were doing things that we simply were not, because it was live on TV. I was shot while live on TV describing a peaceful rally, a peaceful march into which the state police and the Minneapolis city police and the National Guard had come in and started firing tear gas and flashbangs and rubber bullets. If we're not there to tell that story, the story does not get told. And hence, We have to be part of the story of democracy. Democracy depends on an informed electorate. If the electorate does not know that the police are shooting at people who are not doing anything wrong, that the police are shooting at journalists to try and silence them, that the police want journalists curfewed because when journalists are curfewed, police get to do whatever they want to do. That's what happens in other countries. You and I come from other places. We know what happens when journalism is silenced and authorities get to do what they want to do. And that cannot be allowed to happen in America.
You have a very interesting history. You are a person that came from many places. You said you had so many passports. What does one more have to do with it? Tell us a little bit about that, because I think one of the reasons you are so good at what you do is because you have seen it from so many different angles, not only ethnically, not only racially, but in every single aspect. And I think to some extent, journalists, if they haven't lived it, they at least need to have learned about it. And our educational system is so poor that they don't. They just think glory, glory, hallelujah, and nothing else. So please expand on that.
We have to read. If we don't live it, and I have lived much of it, and I have, thanks to my employers, NBC and Al Jazeera and CNN, I have been around the world for these things. So when I was in Iran when we did the nuclear deal, but I was talking to Iranians the whole time. I was also interviewing vice presidents and politicians, and I do a lot of that, but that's half the job. The other half of the job is knowing how people live and how people think. And I really think that, look, in 2015 is when I became an American citizen. What did I care? I had a lot of citizenships, and I'm Canadian. Having a Canadian citizenship is probably one of the best citizenships in the entire world. I thought of citizenship as a series of rights, including the right to vote. And that's important, but I didn't care that much. In fact, many of us didn't care that much in 2015 because we weren't worried that democracy was coming apart. So what did my one vote in New York actually matter? What happened that night in Minneapolis is I learned that citizenship is not simply your right to vote or any of the rights you are accorded under the Constitution. It is your obligation to make society better. It is your I complained to a buddy who said, a Canadian who had become an American, who said, "Why didn't you become an American citizen?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to do jury duty." And she laced into me. She said,
I read that. Yes.
Yeah, she said, you want to enjoy the fruits of this country and the good things that it gives you, but you don't want to sit for jury duty. But her larger point was not about jury duty. I still haven't done jury duty, by the way. The larger point was you owe your society certain things. And in this perilous time in which we exist in 2024, in 25 years, when our grandchildren ask us, what is it you were doing when democracy was imperiled in 2024? You do not want to be able to say nothing. You do not want to be able to say, but I wasn't really paying attention. It didn't really affect me. It fully affects you. So my getting shot made me realize, because I'm not a black man in America who is in danger of dying when the police pull them over. I am an American citizen who understands that people are not treated equally in this country. So when a black man's life is snuffed out on video in Minneapolis, democracy and justice are not applied equally, and that applies to me. In 2024, today in America, you and I enjoy certain rights that every woman in our lives does not enjoy, which means democracy is not being applied fairly and equally, which means it is not finished yet. And because I come from a place where there was apartheid, I understand that when it's not equal for all, it's not equal for any. 6% of the population of South Africa, the white people, had the vote. They thought they had a perfect democracy. If you were white in South Africa, it felt amazing. But there's zero democracy. If there's not democracy for all, it doesn't exist. And that's what we have to realize. If you don't struggle to vote because of where you live, it doesn't mean that it's not your fight to make sure others can vote clearly. If you don't ever need to get an abortion, it doesn't mean that you don't have to fight for others who may need that one day. And that's what that date in 2020 when I got shot meant to me. I am in the fight the same way everybody else is. I do not have a privilege as a journalist to stand off to the side, watch what's going on, and tell you all about it.
Ali, it's interesting because in the original journalist school of thought, it was person A says something, person B says something, and you just throw that out there. And what the Trump group, the MAGA group, and many others, even let's say during the Red Revolution, etc., what they've learned to do is they've used that supposed balance to abuse the system, to mislead the folks. And what I love about what some journalists, as I said, on one hand, they do is they force context. And that's what I see you're able to do in a manner that doesn't destroy the conversation, the dialogue.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about that.
And it shouldn't destroy journalism, right? I see it on Twitter all the time. People say if there's a discussion about whether it's raining, you don't book one person who says it's raining and book another person who says it's not raining. You open the window and you put your hand outside and you find out if it's raining, right? There's truth and there's bullshit. And we don't give them, we are not here to give them equal weight. What I am entirely prepared to give equal weight to people who are not lying to me. You may have a strong view about abortion or minimum wage or health care or whatever the case is. But if you are arguing honestly from where you come, maybe it's a religious belief, maybe it's a philosophical belief, but you're prepared to make the argument properly, you are invited onto my show to have a debate. And I will debate you even if my audience doesn't like you or your opinions. And I do it fairly often, as you know. I book people and I hear on social media, I don't know why you're giving this person a platform. I will give you a platform if you're being honest. If you honestly believe there should be no minimum wage or minimum wage should be lower or there shouldn't be universal health care. These are all things I believe should happen, right? I have my own views and I don't see anything wrong with my viewer understanding that I have views. There's this thing about objectivity in journalism, right? That you've got to be objective. Objective doesn't mean pretend you don't have opinions. I have opinions. I cover hurricanes, right? I have an opinion. Hurricanes are bad for people. They kill people. I cover tornadoes. Guess what? Tornadoes are bad for people. They kill people. I cover school shootings. School shootings are terrible. I'm against them. I'm absolutely against them. I'm also against lying. I'm also against people who run for office who are against democracy, because while you and I may not share views about how our country should be run, we share views about how we engage in civic activity, or at least we should. I'm not going to share views with you about the fact that this should be a dictatorship or this should be an authoritarian country. And yet, there's one party right now running on the basis of a document called Project 2025, which is more than 800 pages long in great detail. And one of your obligations as a citizen is to read it and understand that if you cast a ballot for members of that party, please don't come and complain to me in 2025 and 2026 and 2027 that you feel your rights have been curtailed because you voted for that. Do not vote for your rights to be curtailed. We are not fighting off missiles from another country who is trying to invade us. We have the vote. We have the right to make our own decisions in America, and that is the obligation of citizenship that I now hold because I now have an American passport. Now I am an American citizen. I must fight back the pressures on democracy just like you must and everybody else must. As journalists, we stand no higher than anyone else. We are foot soldiers for democracy.
You know what is interesting? Imagine if all our journalists thought that way and realized that they are part of it. And
Yes.
if being a part of it means that you don't allow what we are trying like hell not to occur in this country right now. Very important. Now, let me ask you a difficult question. I know you have your book and you have the different blogs and stuff that you do on the side, but you also have a huge platform at a corporate station. You are one of the few that I see who is able to navigate that there are competing interests.
Yes.
How can you promote that to other journalists to understand that, yes, sometimes there are conflicts with the way we're going to tell a story, but
Yes.
we must find a way to tell a story in as much as we have those around us.
Correct. And I am not troubled by it. I understand that even where I work on some very serious issues that people feel very seriously about, there are different views. The various prospective hosts hold different views. There are so-called prevailing narratives about certain stories. But I will work with those hosts. I appear on their shows and they appear on my shows. I sub in, as you know, for various people whose views are not the same as mine, but I am a pluralist, right? I believe that the quality that we most hold, even as equal to democracy, is pluralism. The idea that we live in a world in which people hold different views, they have different faiths, they have different appetites, they have different diets, they have different lifestyles. And I am not here to tolerate yours. I write in my book, I think tolerance is a terrible word.
Thank you.
tolerate what you do or your religion or your life or your skin color. It is for me to embrace the fact that both of us live in this place and share in its fruits. Because I came from a family who, by the color of your skin, they could not vote. They were not entitled to certain freedoms. So they came out of apartheid thinking, I want none of this ever again. I want none of this bullshit. People are not judged by their backgrounds and by their ethnicity and by their religion and by their sexuality and by their color, or by their political views. So I do not hold it against anyone, including my colleagues who do not share my view on what I think are very important matters, including Israel-Gaza, right? I will continue to engage in them as long as they, and I believe they do, engage in good faith discussions about the whole thing. And as long as good faith discussions mean being open to debate. Be prepared to debate. You can't just hold opinions and not be prepared to argue why your opinions are there and not be prepared to listen to others. Look, Israel-Gaza, it's a complicated matter, man. It's been going on for a long time. If it weren't complicated, it probably would have been solved a long time ago. We're not going to get anywhere simply by yelling at each other. We're not going to get anywhere by calling people names. We're not going to get anywhere by accusing people of things. We're going to get places by continuing to engage in difficult conversations with people who do not share our views. And while I work in corporate America and I understand the limitations of that, I will say my employers have supported my right to do that, my right to engage in whatever dialogue I want to engage in with whatever guests I want to engage in or whatever colleagues I want to engage in. I sometimes get the sense that I'm swimming upstream or working against a prevailing narrative, but that's fine. I'm a journalist. I'm set up to do that.
That's why everybody needs to get small acts of courage, a legacy of endurance, and the fight for democracy, folks. That book is going to be listed in the article and the correspondent blog for this program. Ali, for everybody who I interview, there's always a last question, and it's because I know my limitations, and that is, what would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't, or what do you want to say that we hadn't touched on based on the interview thus far?
Well, the message in the book, it's an easy read. And part of it is people take all sorts of messages from it, right? Some people think it's a book about immigration. Some people think it's a book about ancestry. Some people think it's a memoir, but it's not. It's more about my family than it is about me. But fundamentally, it is an ode to citizenship. It is an ode to the idea that all of us can, in our own small way, change the circumstance we're in. Many of us feel very disheartened and overwhelmed by the political situation we're in, but we can engage, as you do, right? You engage all the time. You have not decided, I'm done. This is too hard. This is too much work. And the whole point of that book is that we all have the power to change something. You may not even live to see the change. But because that's what I write about in my family. My grandfather died in 1961 at the age of 58, thinking all his efforts had failed, and yet his son became a member of parliament, and his grandson is the guy you're talking to right now. So my point is, do not give up. Do not think that you are impotent. You are not. You have strength and you have power.
Ali Velshi, award-winning journalist, host of Velshi, and chief correspondent for MSNBC. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thanks for having me.
Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto, Willies.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive